Hello, this is Yarrow, host of the Vested Capital podcast, the show about how people make money, build capital, and then put their capital to work. I interview startup founders who've enjoyed big exits, angel investors, venture capitalists, crypto and stock traders, real estate investors, and leaders in tech. Today, you're going to hear my interview for Vested Capital, episode number 7, with Jennifer Beck. Jennifer is the co-founder of Cannabis, which was acquired by Helix TCS, and currently she is the co-founder and CEO of GHE, which is a cannabis retailer where she's actually making her own CBD products. I should say it's a CBD retailer for skin and body care products. Cannabis, the company she founded and then sold, was a marketplace, basically connecting the producers and the buyers of cannabis-related products. So you're going to hear during the first half of this interview how that company was started, all the challenges that come with working within a space that is highly regulated, and also because of the nature of the different laws around the states and around the world, lots of extra challenges in terms of things like getting financing, being able to process transactions, which she still could not do today and could never do when she was the co-founder of Cannabis. So as you will learn, her marketplace was actually running under a business model that was very much a traditional publishing model, bringing together two groups of people, creating an audience, a marketplace, and then monetizing with things like sponsored posts and other types of paid advertising that the user of the platform could do to reach and connect with each other. So Jennifer breaks down everything that she did with that, how she met her husband, who became her technical co-founder. She raised investment in that company, and then how they eventually sold for over 7 figures to the Helix TCS company. And that was a really interesting story, actually, because the timing of the sale was when TCS was actually about to float to an IPO with essentially a penny stock. So a lot of the equity that Jennifer and her husband were about to receive in a new company was just floating, could have gone anywhere. The value of that equity, as she said, was all over the place. So it was an interesting story to hear about that. We also hear Jennifer talk about GHE, her current project, and how she put together the product, how she did her initial website launch and got her first customers, and what her strategy is around that. So amazing story. If you're interested in the cannabis space, if you're interested in building a platform like a two-sided marketplace, if you're interested in creating a physical product, Jennifer's done all of this, so you'll find this podcast really interesting. Before you go and listen to that, I want to once again introduce you, if you've never heard of it before, to my company, inboxdone.com, which is the sponsor for today's episode. Inbox Done is a service where we provide an inbox manager or several to take over replying to your emails for you, whether it's your personal inbox, your business inbox, your customer service email, or your help desk, anything to do with email, managing messages, even social media messages, things going into your Instagram IMs or Twitter DMs or LinkedIn DMs, all those kind of places. We can answer those questions for you. So we provide English as a first language, great communicator, someone who's been specially trained to manage email. They step in and take over this function for you and or your company and your entire team, as we are working with teams now as well. For more information about that, head to inboxdone.com. Now let's get on to the interview with Jennifer Beck. Okay, I'm very excited today to be talking to, my first ever guest specializing in the cannabis space. And that's not a topic I've had a lot on my podcast before. So this will be hopefully an enlightening experience for me and the listeners as well. So I'd like to welcome Jennifer Beck to the show. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So I'm just going to read off your LinkedIn page, just a couple of highlights so people can get a brief background of what you've done. And this is how I first found out about you, actually, was as a co-founder of Cannabis, which was acquired by Helix TCS. It's funny, there's a T something in most of the cannabis names, the THC, TCS, and currently you're co-founder and CEO of GHE, if I think I'm saying that right as well, which you've taken your cannabis skill set and applied it, I'm guessing, to direct to consumer, like retail, selling your own products that you've made. So I'd love to hear more about that. So those are the two main companies I know about. Is there any other ones that you've got hidden away that aren't on the LinkedIn page that we should know about?
Nope, Cannabis and GHE are the highlights.
Awesome. Okay, well, if you don't mind, I love doing this in chronological order. So if we could go back in time, even before Cannabis, where were you born and did you have any entrepreneurial sort of stories in your teenage years or even before that?
Yeah, so I'm a Denver native. I've been here my whole life, and I was born an entrepreneur. So, when I was a kid at home in the summers, one summer I took every book out of our house and I put little barcodes on the side and I put them all back and I was going to open up the house to the neighborhood and make it a library. My parents were furious. They had to pull all the tape off everything. So I've always, I had newsletters connecting my neighborhood at 10 years old. When I was in college, I was a psychology major and I started a blog called Mismorphosis, which chronicled kind of my dating, my growing up, and my psychology experience and kind of blending it. And that became a really popular blog. It was kind of the early days of blogging. And that led me to my first job, which was becoming an online marketing director.
Okay, well, you have to tell me more about the blog. I also started in the blogging space. Well, it's not quite started, but certainly early days. What year was that blog started?
So I was about 21 and I'm 34 now. So about 13 years ago.
Okay, so fairly, I started my blog in 2005. So you would have been sort of maybe a couple years after that. So that's definitely early days. Did you see that blog becoming like a business for you when you first started it, or was it more of an experiment?
Totally an experiment. I read a book. I was so inspired. I wanted to talk to someone, didn't know who to talk to, and Googled how to start a blog. And Mismorphosis just kind of flowed. But I loved it. I loved learning. I loved blending the copywriting and the art and kind of learning these early days of, online marketing. And there's still an amazing community, but there was a really amazing community of people kind of pioneering back then that I enjoyed learning from.
Yeah, it was a bit of the golden days. Can you remind me again, you were in university, I'm assuming, was it psychology, given the topic of the blog?
Yes, I was a psychology major.
Did you expect that to turn into a career type job when you were doing that? Or was that more just because that was a topic, you were interested in?
Yeah, so mental health is really dear to my heart. I had an eating disorder in high school, and in college, I thought this is my calling. I'm going to become a psychologist and work with young women. And so Mismorphosis was kind of the beginning of me exploring that voice and exploring these different schools of philosophy and understanding what applied to me. But then the blog ended up leading me down a different road, but we have kind of returned to the mental wellness calling now with Jihi, which has been an amazing full circle experience.
Okay. Yeah, Mismorphosis. It does sound like you're a superhero with that title. I like it.
Isn't that fun?
Can you take us forward? So you have the blog. I'm assuming you graduated, and then you got a role in marketing. Is that right?
Yeah, so I started working for a tech company in downtown Denver. They did a conference software, so apps to help you find your sessions and meetups, which was all very new at that time. And I took over as the online marketing director there. And that is actually where I met my husband. He was a developer at the company, and he hopped in and looked at Mismorphosis and said, "Oh my gosh, this is a mess." I had like 30 fonts going. I discovered you could have custom fonts. I used every font I liked. It was just really, really unstructured, really wild. And he came in and really dialed in my presence and gave me a lot of tech resources.
Okay. I'm curious, you took a job in marketing, yet you were kind of more in wanting to help people with sort of mental health. Was there an aspect of the marketing? Because I know marketing is a psychology subject at the end of the day. Did you, making that choice to enter marketing, was there a little bit of, maybe later down the track, I will do more with the mental health and this obviously will pay my bills right now? Or did you actually see there's a connection some way with the marketing and the mental health eventually?
That's a great question. So the majority of people that enter the PsyD programs, which is what I was looking at, it's around 27. So they usually look for some gap years and you need to, do internships and kind of get ready for that. So in that period of time, I needed to work and I loved the work of marketing. I loved the work of Mismorphosis, the actual physical writing, creating, building. And so that I kind of got swept away with that.
Okay, so there was the kind of you didn't feel like you were betraying your mental health studies in any kind of way, entering the world of marketing. I know some people feel like sales and marketing is kind of icky, but I'm glad to hear that might not be the case. Take us forward here. So you're working in marketing, met your husband, your website obviously is, the fonts are at least starting to look consistent, if nothing else, right? Take us forward. How does Cannabis enter the picture here? Is it anywhere on the cards yet, or is that coming further down the track?
That's coming further down the track. So I ended up kind of moving to a couple of different companies as I grew as an online marketer and really craved being out on my own again. I really stopped writing Mismorphosis when I met my husband. There was a lot of dating and a lot of just me being young and very free on that blog. And suddenly there were two of us and he was okay with it. But the idea of sharing both of our story didn't seem as fair. So Mismorphosis kind of started to wind down. I started growing as a marketer and I really craved being on my own. I had a lot of ideas. It's always been a challenge for me to work for a job. And marijuana was about to be legalized in Colorado. So at the time we had a medical market. The recreational market was about to open up. And that's when we really got curious about the tech opportunities.
Okay, so how do you explore that given, I'm assuming when you say we, it's your husband too, given he had a technical background. So you've got that kind of combination of your marketing skill set and his technical background, although you're not technical given you did build a blog yourself as well. And maybe you can connect the dots too for your husband's side of this. Did he have an entrepreneurial background? Because for you two to consider starting business yourself, was that daunting or just natural? Like, how did it feel?
That's a great question. So I'm very high risk taker, entrepreneurial, full of ideas, resilient. My husband's also very resilient, but he's not. He's always pictured himself in a very stable job, but he's younger. So he's 3 years younger than me. So at the time he was still really young and like, whatever, this is really exciting. I might be settling down, but I think it was a wild ride for him and he was really gung ho about exploring it. So his skills are, deep technical development, back end, front end, full stack. And then he's also multimedia, web. So he can do design, print, collateral. And then I've got the marketing and the business side. So together we were kind of this one-stop shop. We had a little web agency and, we did some sites. So we had been exploring. And I had a friend from high school who owned a successful medical dispensary called Doctor's Orders. So I took him out to dinner and said, what do you think are the tech needs in the cannabis space? And he said, here's what's coming. Right now, the market is not vertically integrated. So right now, you have growers and you have dispensaries, and it's mandatory vertical integration. You have to have both. You have to be both a grower and you have to sell your own stuff with this 30% allotment for wholesale. So right now, you can mix and match a little strains or a little overflow, but for the most part, you have to supply your own product. That mandatory 70-30 vertical integration is going to be ending this spring. This was around like August. It's going to be ending this spring. And all of a sudden, we are going to have standalone licenses. There's going to be standalone growers, standalone retailers, and this wholesale market is going to open up. And at the time, everything was done over the phone. It was really like, hey man, I got a little leftover product. It's really good stuff. Everyone wants it. Here's what it costs. But nobody knew, what is the fair price? It's all happening over the phone. It's all happening through communication. So he said, let's create the first wholesale marketplace. And that was what we ended up doing.
Okay. So now I know when I was reading just the description, a wholesale marketplace, my mind, having not spent a lot of time in wholesale, I do think of maybe Alibaba. I don't know if that's a good example of a kind of a marketplace. And I guess it's wholesale in some regards. You're going direct to China. Was your vision kind of a peer-to-peer marketplace where we provide the platform and then the growers will come to it, the buyers will come to it, and we be the eBay or the Amazon or whatever, the middle person of that? Is there more to it than that? Certainly when you were thinking about it at the beginning.
That was very much it. And, we were huge proponents of the lean startup philosophy. So we get an MVP out there, the minimum viable product, and then we're going to iterate. Our whole emphasis was on scalable, iterative technology that we could move as the market evolved, because the cone of uncertainty was deep. At the time, you don't know where things are going legislatively, and you don't know where you're necessarily going to find the most revenue. Obviously, the best outcome would be that we can take a cut off everything that moves through the system. But as a non-licensed business, that was not legal, and it still isn't legal. You're also dealing with a lot of restrictions in terms of payment processing. So just being able to say, move the payment through us like a Shopify, and then we take our 2% and you pay your payment processor. That's really where the big opportunities were with Cannabis, but because of financial restrictions, were not available to us. So what we saw as the present day need was, let's create kind of an eBay, Alibaba community. And we can create, first of all, we bring this compliance element, because you really want to be sure. This was right after the Silk Road, the dark web stuff had happened and had been exposed. And we were really sensitive to, we want to be sure anyone that's transacting on our platform is supposed to be here, and we're not facilitating illegal transactions. So a lot of our business was about the compliance and managing the database and the licensing infrastructure and making sure those rules and permissions were really, really tight and connected to the state, connected to the licenses as they moved with the state. And then another big piece was data transparency. So showing what is the average price in the market, how much are listings being viewed, how many connections are happening over those listings, where is there really supply and demand? And that was us kind of moving it out of this phone call environment into this transparent marketplace.
And where is your actual, like, what are you making money from in all of that at the start? Because you said
it was really challenging. We made a lot of money in advertising. So we set up storefronts, especially for the MIPS. So MIPS are the infused product manufacturers. There's 3 license types. You have the growers, you have the retailers, and you have the MIPS who are making infused products. And the infused product manufacturers are the ones that are creating brands that can go to every store. So it's really different than wholesaling flower, where if you wholesale flower, there are some shops that will keep your label on it. But for the most part, shops are going to white label it and say, this is all our stuff. They're not going to give credit back to the grower. But with the MIPS and these branded edible products, you saw people creating brands that really had followings across the state. And then eventually those were the first brands to really go nationwide through different licensing models. So helping the MIPS advertise to all these licensees, these retailers, and then help them source their products through the growers was a huge space for us, as well as servicing the ancillary community. The ancillary community are non-licensed businesses who service the licensed businesses. So payment processing, banking, compliance, consulting, legal, grow equipment, anybody that services the legal cannabis industry, we had the decision makers on and engaging, and it was a really targeted platform.
Okay, so you would have like a sponsored post area or like a highlighted person or organization within the marketplace, and they would be paying money for that kind of highlight. Or even, correct me if I'm wrong, you might have had like a newsletter as well that would have gone out and you would have promoted someone in that. I'm kind of thinking back to like traditional publishing models, basically, when you monetize with advertising. Am I on the right track there?
Yeah. So we had the ability for businesses to promote their posts, kind of bump them for those one-time fees or buy packages, buy employee packages. We had actual like catalogs that were really interactive with video, polls, giveaways, pictures that the ancillary service providers could purchase and could use those to engage. Very strong email marketing, because we utilized email marketing to share pricing data. So every week we report Cannalytics. Cannalytics was a phrase we coined. And every week we would report Cannalytics to the market. So we had really high engagement rates with our newsletters. So it was just all of those kind of combined that created our revenue streams.
Yeah, that's interesting. Was the plan like from the start to be such a publishing kind of model, or did you actually think eventually we would be taking a cut of transactions or facilitating some part of the value chain that you're taking, a part of, you're doing it for them and charging a fee for it? Was that in your mind?
That was always the vision. We hoped that legislation would progress much sooner than it did. And it actually still hasn't. We still haven't had banking reform. We're still waiting for that. So that ended up being a huge, huge challenge of the business. And another challenge of the business that we didn't understand going into it, no one knew, it was all brand new, is how tight the margins are for licensed cannabis businesses. So, we have kind of this impression that the dispensaries and the growers are just rolling in weed money, and numbers are up. Everyone's smoking pot during quarantine and everyone's making a lot of money. It's actually not really the way it goes. There's 2 main reasons. One is that there's a lot of licensing and compliance fees that go into being one of these regulated businesses. They're heavily regulated. So you've got all your startup costs, and then you have all these licensing fees. And then there's this law called 280E, which most people aren't familiar with. And it's from the war on drugs. And it basically states that if your business is selling a federally illegal substance, you can't deduct your business expenses.
Oh, wow.
And so, right, it changes everything. That's why we were and still are so passionate about banking reform and legalization. I don't know if 280E will ever be overturned without legalization. And I don't know if they want it to be overturned, because it's where the government's making a lot of money. So licensed cannabis businesses are taxed on their gross rather than their net. And so when you have this 280E, in addition to all this compliance, in addition to being a startup, you have a lot, especially in the early days when you had way more mom and pops. Now we have more of these multi-state operators and the publicly traded companies. And then with all the banking restrictions, there's no access to capital and loans. So it's a stretched community more than you'd think. We did try a couple things like working with a Bitcoin company, integrating like this Bitcoin thing that would allow people to transfer payments online. Right now it's all cash because of the lack of banking reform, and hoping that that might work. And we take a couple percent off the top for facilitating the payment online through this Bitcoin switcheroo that happened in the middle. And I mean, we had some of our biggest spenders, the guys that paid for advertising, no questions asked, promoted every post, like guys that were really, really passionate about using the platform. And one of these guys came back and he said, I would rather count $20,000 in ones than pay an extra 2%. We don't have it. I mean, so it really showed us that this is going to be a long road till it's doing that.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Yeah. It's interesting. I read, I think it's the $1 billion something like here in Canada. I'm from Montreal, and I think it's Hexo Corp. Is that right? The author and whose company, and that book, much like you're saying now, is constantly talking about changing legislation and rules regarding everything from packaging to sourcing to farming licenses to how you advertise. It's just like such a constantly evolving industry. I can see why you two made the choice to focus more on a platform that services rather than becoming an actual service provider, because at least you don't have to deal with quite as much. I mean, you're still in the industry, but you're not worrying about anything more than the technical side of this, which actually I'd love to talk a little bit more about now. I can understand your platform now, what you were doing. And given it's a two-sided platform, and you were monetizing with all these kind of exposure points for your audience, you have to have an audience for that to be of value to anyone. So, and it's two-sided. So you have to find the suppliers and the people who want to buy, or the people who want to pay attention to the people who have something to offer. How did you start that process? And I know you're the marketing brain of this equation too. So what was your thinking right from day one? What do we do? Get the supply side first and then find the audience for it? Or what was your thinking?
Yeah, anytime you have these marketplace ideas, it is a chicken and egg, and you have to get it off the ground before it starts to move. So engagement was our number one metric. How many people are logging on? How many actions are they taking? And from day one, we were building relationships with the growers. We needed to have product available. We went live in January, knowing that vertical integration was coming. It was ending. Mandatory vertical integration was ending the end of spring. So we had a little bit of this ramp up period where we could kind of say, are you ready? We have product for you. People didn't know if there was going to be a shortage. There were all these questions. And so we spent the first 6 months really building our growers, building our inventory. I remember we sent out our first newsletter. We're like, we have 100 pounds. And it was like, we're flush, but eventually you have thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds on the platform. And then it was about, you really think, when it comes down to it, you end up building these companies, especially in tech. You think we're going to scale and everything is systems and funnels. And especially coming from web marketing, everything, the perfect funnel will crack any code, and it will. But you really do build it one relationship at a time, and, one very meaningful relationship at a time. So we built very strong relationships with our growers, and then very strong relationships with our retailers. And then I became very involved in the community. I was the vice chair of the Colorado Cannabis Chamber of Commerce. I was the only ancillary business on the board. So we're working with all licensees. And it was our mission to support the licensees in representing them on a legislative level, advocating for their needs, advocating for their profitability, advocating for their safety, and supporting their businesses. And we had to just really, really become their champions to earn their trust and to build that engagement.
So you must have spent a lot of time in person and on the phone. For a tech startup, you would have been like very, very face-to-face.
Oh, the hours were insane. Yeah. I mean, we never left that office before 10 o'clock. We worked, I didn't have a kid. Now I have a 4-year-old. At the time, I didn't. We worked from 8 a.m. to midnight every single day. And I was in tons of meetings, always meeting with people, always meeting with investors. We had a very big team. And then at night, I did like to really get involved in the actual development. And that was the beauty of having my husband running the development side, is we were really close. We called it flowing. We would flow through the app all the time. So how many actions does it take me to get from here to here? Where does it get confusing? Where does it break? And we were just constantly flowing, because there's all these permutations of experiences depending on who's viewing the app, we had all these different user experiences. And that was one of my absolute favorite parts. But yes, it was about constant feedback and that iterative model, then iterating on that feedback.
Now, you mentioned investment. Did you get investors from day one, or did that come later on?
Yeah. So we raised money right at the very beginning. It ended up being Josh, the one who owned Doctor's Orders, and came up with the idea. And then we had another silent partner. So we did raise money to get off the ground. And then we continued building relationships with investors until we actually found the person that we decided to sell to.
So when you're raising for this kind of space, is it difficult to raise funding? And ask that knowing, like you said before, the banking side of it is difficult. And having read this book before, I remember they were also having trouble getting traditional financing. So at any point in time during, your process of raising money, did you have to, like, I'm guessing it's always within the cannabis space, you're almost raising always from other players in the space. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's always, family offices, independently wealthy individuals. There are some institutions that touch it, but largely they don't, and that's the same situation we still have with banks. There's limited banking. So it's a lot of meetings, just like anyone who needs to be constantly raising money. You're constantly answering a lot of questions by people who are very curious about this big industry, and then just generating those relationships and hoping that they're available when you need them. But it is challenging, and you really are staying with family offices and private investors.
Yeah, I know I've listened to a lot of podcasts with like VCs and angels, and some of them have a blanket policy like no sex, no drugs, and weed tends to fall into that. So therefore, they don't back anything to do with cannabis. Even a platform like yours, which is not actually doing the selling, you're just doing the matchmaking. So extra challenge. Can we go back to the growth of the company? So you're doing all this work to get the supply side. How long did it take you to reach the point where you're actually making, and maybe you can do it in like chronological order, making a full-time living? Because you must have been working a job, I'm assuming, while you two were building this at night, or did you, as soon as you get the investment money, you quit everything you were doing elsewhere? How did that growth phase go financially for you two?
Yeah, so financially, it was a really good time in the market. A lot of this stuff is all about timing. So it was the opposite of a pandemic. The cannabis market was flying high and the regular market was doing really well. So we were actually able to secure a very large investment before we even went live. So we weren't working, and we launched with a team. So we launched full speed ahead. It was just one of those very fortunate divine timing situations, and we were able to put everything into it. And we continued growing the platform for about 3 years until we sold.
Okay. So that's interesting, because in that case, you're doing that not from a place where, okay, we need to make $10,000 a month to pay our bills. It's more of, we have this much money, this much runway from our investors. Usually it's like 18 months to survive to the next raising of funding. And then during that 18 months, you have to double, triple, or something like that in terms of your overall growth. You don't have to be profitable yet. Like, I know before we hit the record button, we talked about sharing numbers and what you're comfortable with. I'm kind of curious, especially considering you sold so quickly, like 3 years is it's not that uncommon nowadays, I think, but still it is from 0 to 3 years later, exiting a company is a wild 3 years. Can you maybe take us through each of the stages of growth in terms of, okay, so we raised this big amount of money, we launched the service. Do you go from 0 to transacting millions of dollars in deals on the platform within a month, a year? Like, what was that growth for the company in terms of what it actually did?
So the company, it never made that kind of money. I mean, it was always making advertising dollars.
Well, I mean,
that
GMV.
was always growing.
Sorry, just to clarify, I mean, like, how much was being transacted on the platform? Not you actually making the money, but between the buyers and the sellers.
Oh, that is such a good question. And the truth is, I don't remember. I'd have to look back at it, at how much was moving per month. It was about 5 years ago now. But I could look back and I could try and find out some numbers for you in terms of how much was moving on the platform. And some of it, now here's a lot of it. Here's a lot of why it's fuzzy, is because we don't always know, because we weren't transacting the payments.
Right.
So a lot of what we had was a lot of listed. We had I don't know, hundreds of thousands of pounds that were listed, and then the listings were moving and they were connecting. But actually that final price data, what it transacted for, getting that final feedback, we had the mechanisms for that reporting so that businesses could download that and have that, but they didn't have to share that with us. They would take those connections and move off the platform. Okay. So that's why I don't know, because we didn't know. We just knew how many businesses were engaging, how many employees were using it, how much was being on at any given time. And the goal was really what it was about. We were supporting the team with advertising dollars, but really what it was about was the value of these users. We had a really, really targeted user base of licensee business owners. And that was valuable as part of a technology ecosystem. So in cannabis, you have to have the plant tracked from seed to sale at every stage of the plant's life cycle. So the government knows, based on these RFID tags, this seedling is in this room at this stage and it's this whatever. And that happens through a point of sale system. And so the point of sale system, integrating that point of sale and that RFID government tracker into Cannabis and having all of these business owners using these synced up systems, that was where it needed to go. It needed to have that kind of relationship. And that was the kind of technology company we sold it up into. So it was less about saying this has reached its max potential. There's nothing left for us here. We're going to exit. It was much more about taking it and spinning it up into an area where our user base was so valuable. Our technology was incredibly clean, incredibly easy to manipulate and work with. And we were able to spin it up into a bigger technology suite that can now support all these systems, grow at a faster rate, and then hope eventually that, they were able to charge more of a subscription, and then hope that eventually the payment processing would open up and there could be a cut. And that's kind of the life cycle. So we sold it at a very early stage in the life cycle of the business.
Okay. And that's what Helix TCS kind of were doing and aiming to continue to do. All those elements you're talking about. Can you tell me, in year 3, you've talked about how you had a vision kind of at the start about potentially, once the legislation opened up, taking parts of the transaction, which never has happened so far. So that obviously, I guess, as the years went by, even if it was only 3 years, you were thinking, we don't know when this is going to happen, so we can't base our decision making on that. We're doing really well with being a platform and monetizing our audience as a kind of a publishing platform. And like you said, we have a very high value stakeholder. The people paying attention to our platform are decision makers within the industry. Can you take me through the period when the acquisition happened? Was that a case of you, like them approaching you out of the blue, or you starting to think maybe we do want to exit, or just, kind of the magic of meeting the right people at the right time? Like, how did it all go down?
Yeah, one relationship at a time. So we reached out to Helix. Helix TCS meant Helix Technology Compliance Security. So their vision was to house all of these key ancillary services under one roof. And we had been meeting with them. They were really interested in the technology side. They were deal guys, and they had a lot of access to capital, and their background was in emerging markets and mergers and acquisitions. So M&A in emerging markets and growing businesses through M&A. And that was really their strategy. So their strategy was to go public early on so that they could use the stock as capital for mergers, or in acquisitions, which is basically what's happened throughout the cannabis space, because you don't have access to traditional capital. You have all these small companies that are doing interesting things, but it's still a small market. So a lot of the power is held in the publicly traded side. That's where a lot of the companies that's the vehicle for investment, and it's the vehicle for acquisitions. And so it really all happens there. So I went to them because I was involved in the advocacy for courier, allowing outside courier services. At the time, you had to have a license to drive the product. So we did a wholesale deal between a grower and a dispensary. We couldn't deliver the product because it couldn't leave a licensee's hands. And so you have these 95-pound bud tenders, these girls throwing, huge bags of weed into their car and driving it sometimes hours, up to the mountains. It was and still is incredibly, incredibly unsafe and incredibly dangerous, and carrying all the cash, then bringing the cash back. So we're advocating for courier services to be allowed. That was about to go through, and we wanted to be involved in the early stages of that. So reached out to Helix TCS, who had a big security arm and had cars, the insurance, all of that bricks and mortar pieces that you would need to implement that. And we started meeting with them about syncing up on integrated deliveries. And that was when the conversation began. They were just about to go public. And so it was a huge leap of faith on our part, because we had no idea where this penny stock was going to go. But Zach, the person who ran it, he's incredibly dynamic, incredibly smart, quite a visionary. And he was working on a deal as well with BioTrack THC, which is the largest point of sale company in the market, and really runs the analytics, they have all the analytics across the country and the compliance. So he had this vision of bringing us all together, but it needed to start with the cannabis arm. So that's when we were folded in with them.
So how does that play out? Do they say, we want to acquire you, and you say, okay, let's talk about numbers? Is it simple as that, basically?
Yeah, it was. He said, we were at a stage where we really either needed money. So we were been looking at a couple different investment deals, but they were complicated. They were complicated because it's just negotiating the deal. Some people wanted more equity. They didn't know we wanted to be non-diluted. Other current investors we had weren't agreeing with that. And then so these other guys were going to walk away. And so we had about 2 or 3 of these deals on the table where I couldn't get everyone to agree on a path. We had one investor that was really early on, and he was looking to do new things and needed some liquidity. And so he was blocking some of our other options. So we were in kind of this tight space. And when Zach showed up and said, listen, we could fold you in, we can support all your employees, we can provide you with these integrations that you really need. We're raising a lot of money. We have access to capital. You can grow how you need to grow. And now you, through the stock, will have liquidity. So it's an exit, that you can choose when you exit. You're still on this road as long as you want to be part of it. But when you're ready to exit, you and your investors have liquidity. And so it took us, 6 months to get to a deal, but everyone was really happy in the end with how it worked out.
Okay. So that means it wasn't like an all equity deal at that time?
No, there was cash. There was the cash that went to the investors, debt got paid off, employees were hired. And then for my husband and I, we were the ones that took mostly equity, and we took a lot of equity. But that ended up working because the cannabis stock market went way up.
Good choice.
Yeah, it was. It's been a gamble. It's been a roller coaster the whole way. But yes.
Is it possible to put a number on this? I know there's lots of stakeholders. You're getting rid of some investors. You two are coming on as equity holders. But could you value Cannabis at a number when it was folded in at that time?
That would be really hard because so much of it was equity that swung so wildly. So, how much, we took the exact day versus a year later, what it was worth and what it was, what that was worth to all of us. It was a 7-figure acquisition all in. And we did really well with it, but it was a high risk acquisition because when they took us on, they had just gone public. So we ended up getting, millions and millions of shares at 20 cents a share. And then those shares went $2, $3 a share. And then they've been vacillating wildly, and we still hold some of them. So Helix ended up then merging with BioTrack THC, this largest point of sale system, and then actually got swallowed up by a bigger company named Forian. So now it's on the NASDAQ, and it's a company called Forian, and how the shares work have changed, but now it's a $13 a share stock on the NASDAQ. So it's a roller coaster. And a lot of the companies in our space have that trajectory. It's mergers, it's acquisitions, it's moving, it's changing. It's just happening really fast, and you're trying to iterate and kind of keep up.
Yeah, it does seem like an unusually wild space to be in. Even just like you can't have a courier move your product because there weren't licenses to do something like that. Like I don't even think, second guess if I'm going to sell anything. I just, UPS or whatever will take it, but it's not so simple in the cannabis space. Before we leave this acquisition story, I just would love to know from your personal perspective with you and your husband, when it came to selling your company and taking mostly equity too in a penny stock, as you said, which is like potentially you might be trading your whole company for nothing at the end of the day. You weren't really sure. What was the emotional decision around that? Like, were you hoping this would be like get you retirement money one day? Or I'm guessing because you decided to stay on and keep working with the company, you did see your future still doing the same thing on some level. It just would be for another company that owns your company, because you didn't sell to like kind of leave completely and go sit on a beach or something like that. There was still something you wanted to do. So what was the mindset for you two? And were there a lot of conversations, just you two as a couple, of deciding what to do with essentially your baby at that time?
Yeah, it was challenging, but we very much saw it as a next step and a growth opportunity. It was an amazing team that was running the company, that was buying us, with a lot of experience, a lot of access to capital, things that were challenging in this space. And cannabis was expensive. It needed money, it needed integrations, it needed things that this could give it really quickly and really well in a rapidly developing space. I think in one sense, part of us has like never fully exited. We've been on this ride for 10 years now, and we're kind of still on it. We raised a bunch of money. We started Cannabis. We moved Cannabis to its next step. We took a bunch of equity. We worked for them. We eventually did have to leave so that we could open up our ability to sell some stock. As long as we were working there, we were insiders, which made it really, really, really challenging to sell. So we worked there for about a year, and then left, and then came back and kept coming back a little bit. I really enjoyed the team. I really enjoyed the new companies that Cannabis was growing into. We had a lot still to offer, but it was really challenging to continue to exit when we were in the company. So that became a dance that went on for a couple of years. And then we've moved now into the CBD space, and we still own a lot of pot stocks. We're still pretty heavily invested in the pot stock space, which vacillates really, really wildly. So part of me sees us as still on this cannabis ride that we've just managed to turn into this very interesting career.
Yeah, I guess you didn't see that coming when you were running your blog, or even before that, studying psychology and mental health. So, although I know there's some overlap, as we're going to hear with Jihi, your next company. But before I ask you about that, this show is called Vested Capital. And frequently, like yourself, I have guests who have had some kind of exit from selling a business. And I'm always curious what you do with that money in terms of investing. You said you worked for the company, but you had to, well, you decided to quit because then you could actually sell some of your stocks and get some liquidity. I'm open to whatever transparency you like here. Every guest is different on what they talk about with investing. But once you were able to sell some stock, is that a case of like, let's just buy the house, we have our own house? Some other people are like, let's buy cryptocurrency. I mean, you're already in a volatile industry with pot stocks, so I'm not sure whether you want to add another volatile asset class to your investing. But could you maybe, anything you want to share around what you did with the money?
Yeah, so we did put a lot into our house, a lot into our living, a lot into our infrastructure. That was really good. Paid a lot of things off and upgraded our lifestyle, which was fantastic. And we did move. So a lot of it was moving out of we were heavily invested in Helix. So taking that and just diversifying into a broader stock portfolio. We weren't ready necessarily to sell completely. We were kind of that middle ground. We wanted to but we found some other companies in the industry we were interested in, and then some companies outside, and we diversified our portfolio. And then we used a cash investment to start Jihi, which has been fantastic because we own 100% of it, which is really exciting for us. At some point we'd like to raise, but to be able to have the runway, the equity, and the ability this time to give a little more in terms of sweat equity, advisory boards. We were the downside of raising a lot of money in the beginning is you have a lot of vested interest in people that need to be paid back from day one. And in a startup, especially the kind of startup culture we really enjoyed building, there's a lot of people that have to show up to make that happen every day and that have to really believe in it, because there is, especially like in this industry, there's so much uncertainty. It's changing every day. You need people that are resilient and flexible and creative and aren't searching for just stability. So that same personality is searching to be part of it and to be part of the exit. And it was very challenging for us with these investors in from day one to do that, to divvy up stock to employees, to bring on an advisory board. It was already a lot of people kind of fighting for the equity from day one. So having Jihi free and clear, owned 100% with its runway in the bank, a diversified stock portfolio, the house, the infrastructure, and then putting some in the bank kind of, it took care of it. And then we still have quite a bit of stock we haven't sold. So I'd say though, we're still very much on the ride because we did put a lot of it into starting Jihi and doing the next thing and seeing where that would take us.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you more about that. So I'm a little surprised, to be honest, after you would have been exposed to the hassles and the challenges in the cannabis space as a actual retailer or distributor, not just a platform for it. Yet you, correct me if I'm wrong, decided to go and make your own products in this space. So what led to that decision?
Yeah. So, and we did get into CBD. So CBD is a little bit different than cannabis. They come from the same plant, but CBD is extracted from what's classified as the hemp plant, which has less than 2% THC. So, or 0.2% THC. So you're looking at really, really, really low THC levels. You're looking at, this is industrial hemp, and it does not have the licensing requirements that cannabis has. So we don't have to have a license. We don't have to have RFID tracking. We can sell across state lines. We have much more generous access to banking. That said, there are still a lot of the same challenges. We don't have access to advertising in the same way a traditional company does. We deal with much higher rates everywhere. We're considered a high risk, payment processor. So it's 5% instead of 2%. We would still benefit greatly from cannabis reform, but it is much more open and available. So it's a little bit different. And we decided to move into CBD because of our experience in cannabis and watching the supply chain and watching the products people were producing. We saw this flood of businesses, people starting CBD companies, and the majority of them were two things. One, they're all white labeled. So a couple major manufacturers producing lotions, gel capsules, pet treats, whatever it is, and these thousands of companies popping up, but they're all buying the same products and putting their label on them. And it's just who can get to market the fastest with the most CBD in their products. And we didn't, with our experience in advocacy and with the plant and having been in the space for so long, we didn't think that was the future at all. It's not about how many milligrams of CBD can I shove into a cheap lotion. It's about really effective synergistic products that use CBD as a hero ingredient, but it needs to be complemented. The rest of the product needs to also be really strong. And what we also saw was that statistically, the majority of CBD users are still in their young 20s. They're cannabis consumers. They're liberal. It's an extension of the cannabis community and that very liberal community. But really who benefits from CBD is a more aging audience. That middle-aged demographic, 30 to 55, isn't as tapped into, we believe, from the CBD market. And that's the consumer that has, first of all, the disposable income, but also needs it. So people seek out CBD for, pain relief. They seek it out because they're feeling anxious, they're not sleeping, fine lines and wrinkles when it's used topically, increasing skin cell turnover. These are all benefits we see as we begin to age. And none of these issues we believed were tackled as well in these white labeled mass produced products.
So that was your goal, to produce your own and sell it directly, not white label it to anyone else.
Exactly.
Okay. So how do you do that? You obviously knew how to source materials, but do you have to get into your own little lab and start testing and making your own product first and then move to selling it from there?
Yeah. So, spent time finding the highest quality CBD producers we could find. We knew from the marijuana space that it's very dangerous to extract lazily. So in marijuana, you extract the THC from the plant, you can make gummies, you can make edibles. But if you're extracting and the plant has a bunch of pesticides or chemicals on it, you're extracting that as well. And that can create these products that give people headaches and make people feel sick. So a lot of it comes down to purity and quality. So first, it's finding the right growers and producers on that side. And then we worked with an amazing lab. We spent 2 years building these formulations. So we have 3 hero products, a face serum, a body balm, and then a sleep tincture, which we believe together really nourish all the layers of the endocannabinoid system and deal with the main reasons people seek out these solutions. So we worked with building these really effective, clean, synergistic formulations with other hero ingredients, clean, vegan, everything you'd expect from a really high quality product. And thinking about, you're going to a woman in her 40s who's interested in trying out CBD for fine lines and wrinkles and making her face feel younger, it needs to be a really incredible serum that and her esthetician or her dermatologist would recommend. So it was beginning to look at the products from that perspective. So we spent 2 years with a lab R&Ding formulations and really getting the products dialed in. And then we work with a contract manufacturer. We did all of the packaging in-house, the website, all those pieces, and went to market in January.
Of this year?
Of this year.
Oh, talking to you when it's also fresh.
Yes.
How's it going so far?
Very well. It was interesting launching into the pandemic. When we talked about Cannabis, it was about being in meetings all the time. And the beauty of those meetings is the constant feedback. You really can see you're selling all day, and you can see when people start looking around and you can see when people go, wait, you can see these questions. And that is, to me, the energy, the thing that feeds the business is the questions and the feedback. And now you know where to focus and where to channel your energy. And with Jihi, we launched into this pandemic. And so there was, in the beginning, very little feedback. It was a lot of just us putting things out there and then trying to understand where the orders are coming from and what's tying them and what parts of the message are resonating and dialing it in. And that was that most challenging piece. But as things have started to open up, the brand's gotten really tight. Now we're moving into a scaling phase, and we've had a lot of interest by some incredible high-end retailers. So we're beginning to move into that deeper place of scaling, both in the retail space, also direct to consumer, launching subscriptions, building our team. We're finally hiring. I put up a job posting for a social media manager, just 20 hours a week. We got 500 applicants in 2 days. It's been wild. So the energy now around having the dialed in brand and scaling it is there. And now we're on that adventure.
It's a lot of applicants, 500. Tell me, for someone who might be even listening to this too, is thinking, I want to get into the cannabis space, and even just from your recent experience with Jihi, how do you do an MVP in this space? Not the side, I can understand based on what you just said, the testing in the laboratory, coming up with your actual product, that in itself is a job, and you have to do that. But once you've done that, you've got your first product, it's packaged, it's got the brand, the label, it's ready to go. You said there's some challenges with everything from advertising to paying a higher price on the transaction fees. How do you MVP selling a CBD product online, which I know it sounds funny, but I feel like it's also competitive now. There's quite a few CBD products for sale. I'm just thinking back, it's completely random, but I was in Croatia 2 years ago, and I'm just at a local market, and there's people selling CBD oils just at that market there too. So it's certainly not an unknown product category now. So how do you MVP, or how did you MVP with Jihi? Purely online or offline or both?
That's a great question. Yeah. And the competition's enormous. That's the most challenging part. I wouldn't say that the competition is the most challenging part, because you still have to create a product that's very unique, and our products are very unique and have very unique selling propositions. But because there's so much CBD out there, there is a wall. The minute nobody's excited about the idea of talking about CBD, or like, you're not going to get a bunch of press coverage because you started a CBD company. I mean, it's just not interesting. So I think the biggest challenge is creating the brand that's multidimensional and really selling the products outside of the CBD, but then you still have to really educate on the CBD. It's a complicated sales puzzle and a marketing puzzle. And it is about getting yourself kind of out of that pack and out of that conversation, that CBD gold rush, and focusing on what the products are. So that is definitely a challenge. In terms of MVPing, I mean, you can't do it the same as you can with technology, which is the beauty of building a tech company. You can build a few features and get people using it and say, where do we go from here? And you don't have this inventory sitting in a warehouse that needs to be moved. So there's it's a different dynamic. There's also a lot of room to iterate everything outside of that product. So you're stuck with your packaging, you're stuck with your formulations, you're stuck with that commitment. In terms of distribution channels, we've spent a lot of time launching a very basic brand ambassador program. So somebody gets a discount and then they can have a referral link. We had a lot of success with our brand ambassador program. It brought in a lot of revenue. So now how can we scale that? There are so many models now of commission structures. We're looking at professional ambassadors versus, a customer ambassador, and then moving in subscriptions. So now there's recurring revenue. How does that recurring revenue impact the ambassador program? So there's still a lot of room for iteration, especially because I do have Chase and we do have this technology side where we can spin up and connect solutions in a really strong way. So you're stuck in certain ways, but there's also there's also something really beautiful about having a physical product that does have a barrier to entry in a way that I remember with Cannabis, everything was proprietary. Everything was, the technology was really beautiful and really scalable and really flexible. And then you'd get somebody coming out of the woodworks with a really fancy WordPress site. And this happened a couple times, and you'd be in conversations with investors and they would get in the middle and start saying, well, we've got it too. And really making a lot of noise. And, we're going to be bigger than them. And you try and explain like the technology, they won't be here, but there's no barrier to entry. Anybody who wants to spin up a WordPress site and make it look good can come in and say they're a competitor and really challenge your relationships with press, customers, investors. With a product, there at some point, there is an amount of capital that goes into the formulations, the ingredients, the warehousing, all of it. You got a little room there, and then it's about iterating the rest.
Yeah, and I can imagine the branding side of it really comes down to it as well, and the product itself, of course. While you were saying all that, I was thinking, so if I create my own product, and assuming I like it, can I just get a Shopify store, find an influencer on Instagram, give them a free sample of my product, get them to be an ambassador, pay a referral commission, and away I go? Is it as simple as that? I know maybe, yeah, I'm getting a yes here.
Yeah, it is that simple. I mean, the internet's amazing. I mean, it is amazing. It's amazing, how accessible it is to spin something off the ground and reach a lot of people. So yeah, I mean, it would be a lot easier if you're not selling CBD. So for instance, Shopify really favors vendors who use their payment processing. So you get the lowest rates, you get subscription hookups, you get all these pieces in Shopify if you use Shopify payment processing. They won't work with us because we're CBD. So now we have to find a high risk payment processor. And for us to release subscriptions, we need to do some really fancy custom microsites, the headless microsite plugin kind of stuff where it's off our primary e-commerce. There's a lot of sophisticated tech that has to happen for us to move around our barriers, which is why, in a sense, even though we have all our products, our first, line of products, we're still MVPing it and building that. We're expanding the technological ecosystem, which is really a lot of our strategy and our edge. But if you're selling anything, if you're selling a widget, yes, you can create a Shopify store. You can put up your widget. You can apply for Shopify payments. You can go find an influencer, send them your widget. And now it's just about traffic. It's about, getting your story out there and brand awareness, because the barrier to entry for creating a brand is so low that there is a lot of noise.
And I'm guessing what we've just described is what you're up against for the months and years ahead. You're just going to be testing traffic sources, creating new product, seeing what converts the best, what drives the most customers, building some brand loyalty, getting those subscription customers on there. Where does the vision go? Is this a case of potentially having an exit as well? You are, as you said, 100% owners. It's all your own equity so far in the company. So where's Gigi, as I'm saying that right again, I gotta Gigi going in the future?
Yeah, so we hope to grow it for a long time. We are looking at a lot of different distribution channels we'd like to keep pursuing. So we have our direct to consumer, which we want to grow that brand loyalty through subscriptions and a very sophisticated customer journey and community journey to build that direct to consumer relationship where, we have the best margins, and we also have the best, I want to say the best control. There's a huge education component to CBD. There's a wellness component, a lifestyle component. And the more we can communicate with someone and create buy-in there, we really create that brand loyalty. And again, it's our highest margin. So continuing to develop that side of the business is ongoing. We also sell to spas and salons because of the formulations and acupuncture offices. So we have a professional program where we're looking, how do we be building relationships with people at these spas, salons, acupuncture offices, getting them using it in the treatment rooms and building out more SKUs for them that complement the products when they're selling it in that channel. And then our third channel is high-end retail. So we have retail sales buyers we're working with. We're working out contracts for bigger distribution there. That is the lowest margin, but of course provides the most brand credibility and then also allows us to tap into new audiences really quickly and grow our volume numbers. So they all have there's different pieces. It's a multi-channel strategy. They each have important pieces and they each have different products that they require us building out. So we're in R&D in kind of these three different segments right now because we're finding our direct-to-consumer business is much heavier on the Reverie, the tincture, which people just buy and use and buy and use and buy and use, versus a retailer. Most retailers, because they don't have high risk payment processing, don't want to touch anything oral. They just want to use topical products. So our retailers, and then the more personal care side is much stronger on our topical offerings. So we have kind of this functional wellness direct to consumer branch we're building, as well as this high-end resort spa side, and then the retailer channel. And they all require different products and different strategies.
Yeah, interesting. It sounds like you so know this space so well, Jennifer. I can just tell, and you're obviously very excited about it. Maybe last question before we wrap it up. All the way back at the start of the story, we talked about mental health and your original studies and your blog topic. And I felt like at that stage, there was a sense of a connection to Jihi at the moment, with the sense that it is about well-being. Can you maybe touch on that a little bit? Like, how much is the product itself? I didn't even ask you, what is Jihi's product? I know it's CBD and it's topical and oral, but is there a connection there to a mental health? Like, is it designed to deal with anxiety, depression, any other kind of mental illnesses? Like, where is the overlap?
Absolutely. So CBD as an ingredient really helps our body come into balance and come into alignment. And the topicals work different than the oral, but together that is what the products are about. And they're also very deep self-care products in terms of rest, rejuvenation, relaxation. We have a whole wellness philosophy at Jihi called self-centered wellness. It's about coming within. It's about, we have meditations, we offer bullet journaling, we have lots of resources, we have a private Facebook community. So that's really where our heart is. As products in mass retail, when we sell online, we tend to fall into this beauty category. But I see us as very different than a beauty brand that asks people to kind of cover up, shrink, look like this thing. Jihi and CBD as an ingredient are so much more about finding our balance, our truth, and using that as a source of power and performance. So we really love working with athletes, high-performing individuals, people that aren't sleeping, need their body to feel good, and bringing back that wellness component and making Jihi about mind, body, soul performance has been really our biggest differentiator, and where the brand has found so much energy in the community.
Yeah, it's great. I've used a little bit myself, and I know some people who definitely benefited from it too, from the helping sleep, if just as simple as that. Jennifer, maybe this should be the last question then. For anyone who's listened into your story, it is interesting because of your background, maybe not technical, but then became technical through blogging, and then through your husband, very technical. Your first platform was a platform that was technical, building a platform to connect suppliers and buyers of hemp and weed and marijuana products, to then now very much like a physical product. You're actually, creating something and selling it. You've gone across a whole range of different kind of industries and careers almost in some ways too, from also working with another company, starting your own with backers, to starting your own 100% with your own capital. If there are, as there are, many people listening to this who are entrepreneurs, now that you've had that experience, what would you advise them in terms of getting started with their first project? Do you think it's best to start with something that is physical with no investors, or go digital and get investors? What do you think is the best combination for a day one founder? If there is an answer for that.
I don't know if there's an answer for that. I think it's about very much surrendering to the journey. In your first startup, it's all about keeping your overhead really low. I was really grateful we were really young. We didn't take a paycheck for a long time. I mean, there was a point with Cannabis where I sold my car and I was like, great, we got 2 months living in the bank. I mean, we put everything into Cannabis, and the hours were really, really extreme. And that was also part of that tech environment. In the tech environment, you have people that can work around the clock and can just build. And so you have to be keeping up with that, which is a very different pace than having a physical business. Physical business has been much slower. You're working with a retailer, you're weeks in between conversations. But then things move, then all of a sudden an order comes through and you move a lot of products. So they're very different paces. I think it's about looking at your stage in life and how much you have, what kind of a life you want to live. A physical product for us has been much more, it's worked better with, we have a young daughter, we have a little bit more balance, we're living more of that Jihi lifestyle. I don't know if I could do what I did with the tech company today, even just at 34 compared to 24. I had a different kind of energy. But there's so much beauty to just that lean startup model, getting started and releasing that MVP of anything and seeing market traction and then investing. Once something is working, there is money available. And so getting those ideas just off the ground and really knowing who your target market is from day one, and then is it resonating for them, is probably just the number one question.
Oh, it's great. Well, I appreciate the time. Besides, and let's mention your website, the obvious place first, Jihi. So it's jihi.com. Great domain name you picked up there. Well done. Any other websites or places you want to send people?
No, the website's a great place to start.
Okay. And you can check out all your products there. Yeah. Thanks for sharing the full Jennifer Beck story. It's been a fun ride, and I can tell it's very much still going. And I feel like, actually, I wanted to ask, is missmorphosis.com, is that also something we can still check out? Is that up and running still?
No, it's very sad, or maybe it's very divine. I stopped paying attention after I had my daughter, like I gave birth. I wasn't paying attention for a couple of months, and I didn't pay my Media Temple bill, and they took the site down.
Oh, no.
And so I still have the domain and I still have the backups, but it was like kind of this life transition of having a daughter, and all of a sudden Missmorphosis was gone. And it was like, well, professionally, maybe Missmorphosis should be down. So I've let it stay there.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, jihi.com is definitely the place to go right now. But no, I appreciate the time and the insight into the cannabis space. It's been wild. It feels like it's still very wild for anyone who's getting into it. And I think your insight will give them either the courage or maybe they'll stay away. I don't know, as a result of what you said. But no, I do appreciate the insight. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And maybe stay away. It is very challenging. It's a roller coaster. So if you're looking for an adventure, I would continue to call it an adventure.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Jennifer Beck and appreciated the detail she went into regarding her two companies, Jihi and Cannabis, including the exit of Cannabis as well. I was fascinated by the whole story. Now, if you want to get all the interviews I release in the future, as well as access to the entire back catalog of Vested Capital and my previous podcast episodes as well, all you have to do is subscribe. Pick whatever app you currently use, whether it's Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, any of the other third-party ones, Stitcher, TuneIn, and so on. You will find the show there. Just look for Vested Capital or my name, Yaro, Y-A-R-O, and then hit the subscribe button. You can access everything. It's always free, and I appreciate if you do subscribe. Also, if you think this episode in particular would be helpful to any friend or family members you might have, maybe they're getting interested in the cannabis space or building a marketplace or creating a physical product, send this episode to them. It's Vested Capital, episode number 7. Send them an email, send them an instant message, WhatsApp, text message, whatever social media platform you use, and tell them to check out Vested Capital, episode number 7. I'd appreciate it. I'm sure they'd appreciate it. And that's it. My name is Yaro, and I'll talk to you on the very next episode. Bye-bye.